It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. I need to add a note before this episode begins. I had emailed Mel a few weeks ago for a follow-up and didn't get a reply. But I know she's a busy lady, and I didn't think much about it. Then today I received a note from Carolina that she had also reached out to Mel several times with no response. So Carolina did more digging and found Mel Shields' obituary. Mel passed away on April 5th, 2025, only 5 days after this interview was recorded. This was quite a shock to us, but I can't imagine the shock it must be to her dear husband, Paul. Paul, I want to extend my heartfelt sympathy. It was a privilege to know Mel through our quilting group. She will be greatly missed. And I want to let you know that you and your family are in our prayers. It was an honor to record Mel's story, and Paul, I hope being able to hear her voice in this interview will give you comfort. Now here's the episode I made for Mel. Mel Shields just has a few rules you need to follow when you're at the quilting room with Mel. There are no quilting police. You make your quilts the way you want to, and if you're happy with the results, so is she. Everyone is welcome in her quilting room. And last but not least, enjoy your sewing machines the way you want to. These rules become very clear as we get to chat with Mel. You'll hear her deep love for quilting and sewing machines. Mel, I am so excited that you are visiting with me on A Quilter's Life.
Thanks for having me, Paula. I'm so excited to be here too.
This is going to be fun. Now, we've known each other for a while. I was trying to remember when I joined that group on Clubhouse. And I don't know, has it been a couple years already?
I think it has been. Before I came down to do this, my husband and I were talking, and I said, well, I've known Paula for a year. And he's like, I think she's been around for a couple in your gal's Clubhouse. So,
yeah,
at least 2, if not 3.
Maybe so. I don't even remember when Clubhouse came up. And I think I found the group pretty quick after I joined Clubhouse.
Yeah, we started during the COVID lockdown. One of us posted about it on a Facebook group and decided that that was exactly what we needed to do. So she set everything up. At one time, we were running 2 every Wednesday, one for like quilters and then our business one. But it never really picked up with just general quilters. So we just stuck with the business one like you come to every week.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate that you guys grandfathered me into that.
We love you.
Well, let's go ahead and jump back to talk about your life. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born and raised in the same teeny tiny town in Kansas that I live in now. No one has ever heard of it. The nearest town that people may have heard of is Topeka or Lawrence. I'm kind of halfway between them, kind of equal distance from either one. It's 300 people. I live across the street from the house that I grew up in my aunt's house. So I haven't gone real far in the last 45 years, but it is part of my soul.
Did you go off to college and come back, or did you go to college locally there?
I did not. I went to Southwest Missouri for college. I spent several years down there. When my dad passed away, I came home, though, to be with my grandmothers, because at that point, they were kind of on their own. My one grandmother was on her own, so I lived with her until she passed away, even after Paul and I were married.
Now, is Paul a local boy?
Kind of, sort of. He was born in Salina, which is kind of in the middle of the state. His mom married a guy that my mom went to school with. And then they moved out here. So he graduated from here too. But he doesn't have all the years here that I have.
Yeah. How about a special childhood memory?
Oh, I was trying to think of this. It is kind of a special memory. Some people might find it traumatizing, but I laugh about it now. I was in 4-H from the time that I was like 7 or 8 years until I graduated high school. And I made my first quilt for 4-H. Pretty proud of it. They're white squares with floral hearts appliqued on them. And I quilted it on my mom's quilting machine. I was super proud of it. Entered it, and people were like, oh no, her mom's a professional long armor. She didn't do that. And my mom pointed out all the errors to it to the judge. I go, no, it's not my work, because I would never let anything like that out. But it's just one of those, what we view as not perfect, other people do see as like excellent. And so that's why that's always been one of my favorite stories. I keep that in my back of my head all the time, is you don't know how you're being perceived by others.
That's a really neat viewpoint of that story.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Because they thought it was great. And she's like, it's not. And I was like, I don't care.
So did the judges deduct points for the things your mom pointed out?
No, I still ended up with a purple ribbon on it. They said she's 10. We don't expect perfection.
And at 10, your mom let you use her nice machine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had my own sewing machine by the time I was 8 in my room, unsupervised. Things that were not safe, that we don't deem safe today. Like, I would never let an 8-year-old have a sewing machine in their room. But I did. Yeah, my mom turned me loose on the long arm, said, don't run over your fingers. You know.
Well, I know that you have other employment besides quilting. Can you share what that is and what made you decide to take that route?
I'm an elementary librarian and IT tech. So I went in for IT, do some student databases for the local school district. And the librarian retired, and I kind of fell into that. She had been my librarian. She had trained me in the basics of it prior to her retirement. So I took that over. Well, it's not the bulk of what I do. It is the joy of what I do in a day.
And from some of your statements throughout the last couple of years, I know it's a lot more involved than just checking out books.
Yes, it's a lot more than checking in and checking out books and reshelving them. I have to order books and stay on top of what kids are reading and what kids want to read. And we do 2 book fairs that wipe out 2 weeks every year. As you know, on those Wednesdays, I am just barely keeping my head above water because I'm tired.
Is there anything else about your family you wanted to share?
So I am kind of sort of an only child. I have a half brother and half sister that are older, but they were basically out of the house by the time I was born. Like I said, I lived with my mom's mom, my grandma Green, for like my entire life. She moved in with my parents when I was born. Her husband had passed away. And then I lived with her basically until she passed away about 10 years ago.
That's a long time.
Yeah. She lived to be 98.
Oh, only 2 more years.
Yeah.
Well, Mel, thinking about future generations, when people look back on your life, how do you think they will describe you?
A sewing machine hoarder? I hope it's not hoarder. I hope it's a vintage sewing machine aficionado. But when we get to the number of how many there are, hoarder works too. I hope they remember me as someone who was open and loving and welcoming of all people who wanted to be quilters, of all kids who wanted to read. And that I just created a warm, welcoming space for whoever wanted to hang out.
Yeah, I can see that. And then what message would you like to give them?
You don't have to be perfect. Finish is better than perfect. It's not hard. There is nothing that hard in this world that you can't try it. And it's okay if you fail. If you try to quilt and you're like, this is not for me, it's okay. But give it a try. Or if you want to scale Mount Everest, go for it. I will not be joining you, though. That sounds like way too much exercise.
And it's a little too cold for me.
Yeah, that too. I don't do good with cold anymore.
When you say you don't have to be perfect, and I know that's true, I would say that to anybody else, but I think there was something in my upbringing that I just strive for that perfection, and I don't like that about myself.
I didn't say I take my own advice, Paula. I said that's my advice. No, I'm the same way. I strive for perfection. There are times that I just cry because it didn't come out the way that I thought it would. And Paul will take a picture of it and go, do you see the error in the picture? And I'm like, oh. And he's like, so the pattern's fine.
I brought one quilt top into Guthrie to show him how horrible this mistake was, and then I couldn't find it. So yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Is it really a mistake that when you walk away from it, you can't find it again? No.
Can't fix it if you can't find it.
Exactly.
Well, tell about other crafts that you do besides quilting.
Oh, man. So I have knitted, not very successfully. There we go. There's one thing I tried it. I'm not so great at it. Crochet. I've done scrapbooking. I've done rug weaving. I've done toll painting. I mean, really, if you can name a craft, I have probably tried my hand at it, including tatting. Couldn't do that either. My brain doesn't wrap that way. A lot of it for 4-H. So arts and crafts in 4-H, you have what we enrolled in. And then when you went to the fair, there was all these different things you had to enter. And I think I tried everything at least once, it feels like. And now I have the leftovers of all that here at the house. And because of that, I started a makerspace at the school so that I could offload some of my leftovers, like my stamping stuff, all of that. I went to the school, and now I'm not allowed to buy craft supplies unless I have a specific project here or I have a project I can use at school with it, because I might have a Joann's. It's bad, Paula.
Well, going from crafts, how about hobbies? Do you have time for any hobbies?
So my hobbies outside of work, like reading, I don't count really as a hobby anymore because I do most of that for work. I don't get time to sew for myself anymore. Everything's wrapped up in sewing projects for my quilt business. I watch NASCAR. I never miss a NASCAR race. I also watch daytime soap operas. I am a 70-year-old woman at heart, man. I love Young and the Restless, Bold and the Beautiful, the new one, Beyond the Gates. Yeah, I record them every day.
Okay, I was going to say either that or you had to have some streaming service because I knew you weren't skipping school to do that.
No, there have been a couple of times when the storyline was really good. I've looked at my boss because she watches Young and the Restless, and I'm like, do you need to have a meeting and we can watch it on the computer? But no, we don't do that. But yeah, I record my daytime soaps every day, and I look forward to coming home and watching them.
Oh, that's funny. When we lived in Willits, the funeral director's wife called my mom one day and asked if she had watched the soap opera because she wanted to know what was going on. She had to miss it that day because she had to work on a body.
We talk about it every morning. There's 3 of us that watch Young and the Restless, and every morning before school starts, we are talking about what happened the day before.
And who do you root for when you're watching NASCAR?
And so I am a 2311 fan, so that means I'm rooting for Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick. And by default, I mean, I'll root for Denny Hamlin too.
I wish I knew the names of these.
Denny Hamlin drives for another team, but he owns 2311. So, you know, I'm okay if the boss wins too.
So do any of your crafts or hobbies somehow show up in your quilting?
The other day, or not the other day, the other month, it was Quilt Block Mania, and it was sports themed. And I struggled because I was going to make a Missouri Tiger, and I couldn't figure out how to make that as a pattern. So I ended up making a checkered flag with race information on it. So I reached into my NASCAR for that. The soap operas, no, other than they sometimes keep me company when I'm sewing.
Do you ever see quilts on the daytime soaps?
I do. I made a quilt wall hanging based off of the wall hanging that is in Crimson Lights on Young and the Restless, but I don't know where I put that little wall hanging up at. You just start getting so many of them that you forget where you put things.
Yeah. So who introduced you to quilting?
So I was born into it. I really don't know when I started. I have some memories of before I even started school of being given like plastic canvas and yarn to practice stitching with. And then I got my first sewing machine, like I said earlier, by 8. It was a little Kenmore, and just started sewing fabric together. So my mom was long armor. My grandma Green, who lived with us, she made quilts all by hand. She never used a sewing machine. My dad's mom was a quilter. My dad's brother and his wife actually owned a quilt shop. They owned a fabric store and did long arming too. So I really didn't have any other choice but to do this, right?
Right. You did have a choice of whether you liked it, but you did not have a choice of doing it.
Right, yeah. And thankfully, I ended up liking it.
I'm curious, with your grandma hand piecing those quilts, I had a relative tell me one time that they used to piece one winter and then quilt it the next winter. How long did it take your grandma to put a quilt top together?
She did not believe in only sewing during the wintertime, so she sewed year-round. Kind of depended on what she was making. Typically, it took 3-4 months for her to put a top together. Hand quilting took longer because she drew everything out, marked all of her quilting out before she started to do it. And then she hand bound all of the quilts that my mom made for other people. So she did a lot of that in between her own projects too.
Wow. Industrious.
She was at home, and if she didn't have a book in her hand reading, she had fabric sewing something. And she could bind a queen-size quilt in a couple hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I did not inherit that skill.
Maybe you just haven't been at it long enough.
Yeah. I mean, she was 80 when those memories were happening. So she had quite a few years of experience under her belt.
Well, you have gotten to see a lot of new tools come out. Whether it's an older tool or one of the new tools, do you have one that is your favorite?
I saw this question in the email before, and I thought, oh, what am I going to pick? And the longer I've thought about it, it's like trying to pick your favorite sewing machine or trying to pick your favorite child. And I don't think it's possible. But right now, currently, my favorite is my AccuQuilt. I'm really having a lot of fun cutting out some tedious little shapes with it that would take me hours to do with a rotary cutter and ruler. So today, anyway, it is my AccuQuilt.
I just saw your video of Paul working on, what do you call that, an orange quilt?
I call it a cathedral window quilt. It's a faux one because what you're calling the orange pieces are not set in. It's a circle folded over. Yeah. All out of denim circles and 4 patches. And then it got so heavy I couldn't move it.
Well, that's what I'm planning to do. I got the die for that circle.
Yes.
And I'm in the process of cutting old jeans. It looks like you used new. Did you use new?
I used new vintage. So there used to be a Lee jean manufacturer in our area. And like my mom had worked for him, and several of the women around here did. My mother-in-law worked there. And one of the gals that I work with at school, she worked there. And she said, I will give you these tubs and tubs of fabric that I have left over from there if you'll make air pockets for the kids. And so we did. And now we had tubs and tubs of these cast-offs from Lee from back in the 70s because they weren't big enough to do anything with. And they let the women take them home. So yeah, I cut all that up. So it's new old denim.
Oh, cool. And the pieces you put in the middle are nice and bright.
Yes, that was Colorworks by Northcott. So they had sent me a fat quarter of that line because I had done something else and like tagged them in it. And they said, here, you need to play with this fabric. And I'm never going to turn down fabric. And I just thought that really contrasted well with the denim.
Yeah, it does.
And I like bright.
When you're working on your quilts, there's so many stages. Do you like a particular step or do you like all of the steps?
I would say my favorite step is the design because I like that playing. And I do like piecing. I love to sit at my sewing machine and piece. I love it. I hate binding though. Hate it.
There's two camps. You either love it or you hate it.
Exactly. It goes back to, remember I said I don't practice what I preach. I don't think I can make my binding look as good as my grandma could. And so then I get frustrated and I'm like, it doesn't look good. And again, no one would ever know that it's not just fine binding. I know it doesn't look as good as the quilts that I have from her.
Okay. Tell about your worst quilting experience.
Oh, well, we're going to go back to childhood again. So you said you were shocked that my mom let me touch her long arm. And when I put that quilt in, it was a huge shock because you have to practice before you do your real thing. And so she had set me all up to practice and was showing me. And I don't remember if like the phone rang or she thought, hey, she's got it. I'm going to give her a couple of minutes just on her own to do it. And I broke a needle and I didn't stop and it threw it out of time.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So great big long arm had to be taken off the frame, taken up to Kansas City for them to look at and go, we can't fix it. And then shipped from there to Denver to be fixed. And it is a testament of her love that I am still here with us today and that I can tell that story because that was a lot of time without her long arm.
Wow. And at the time, she was long arming for customers, wasn't she?
Yeah, that is how she made money, was long arming for other people. So yeah, it was not just a few weeks of not being able to do what she wanted to do. It was a few weeks of telling customers, hey, my machine's in the shop and your quilt's now going to be late.
Wow. And they probably didn't have loaners.
No, what she ended up doing, if I remember right, she went over to my uncle's and used his machine in between his quilts so that she didn't get too far behind.
Oh, wow. With all the time we have, we can do anything we want. What has drawn you to continue quilting when you could do something else?
There was a period of time that I didn't do any quilting. After my mom passed away, it was just really hard because everything was hers at that point. I didn't have my own stuff. And then when I got married, well, just before I got married, my grandma was like, you have to make a quilt for your bed. And I started that project and I absolutely hated it. And then one day I had on PBS good old Eleanor Burns. And she was like, we can make the same pattern. We don't have to use the same fabrics. And that something clicked. And I went to the local quilt shop and I bought some new fabric and I made something my way. So still a traditional quilt block, but it was with fabrics that spoke to me, bright. And I realized it fed my soul and I needed that to help ground me. So it was always in the background. About 20 years ago is when my soul said, hey, you've got to go back to a sewing machine.
You just had to get back to a sewing machine, and then you didn't stop there. Is that when you started collecting them?
When I went back to sewing, I already had a sewing machine. It was the one that I bought. I always say it's the first one I bought with big girl money. It was a Singer Merit. And Paul actually wanted to sew something. And I said, well, use my machine. And he was afraid he would tear it up. And he found a necky at the Goodwill store. And he said, do you know anything about this? And I'm like, we're buying it. And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, no, we're buying it. And that's the brand my mom used. So we bought it, got it home. He did whatever it was that he wanted to sew on. And then he threw it out of time, like right at the end, and he had to fix it. I had a newer brother that died, and I was looking for a machine, and a friend of my grandmother's passed away, and her sewing machine was for sale, and it was a Necky BU. And I said, oh, I have to own that. And so I did. And he did some work on it. And then it was just an avalanche after that. We just started picking up whatever was cheap. It gave him something to work on. He started sewing because, well, when you work on sewing machines, you got to test them. And I couldn't test every one of them because I was busy doing other things. When I say snowball, I mean snowball.
So what is the count now?
I've been trying to avoid this part of the conversation all night. At last count, we had over 300 sewing machines.
Wow.
And probably 280 of those just need a couple of drops of oil and some thread, and they are ready to go.
So how many machines do you use to sew?
Now, I only use 2. I use my Necky BU and my Baby Lock Jazz 2. Paul, on the other hand, will swap machines every time he sits down. So when we were doing masks, he made around 1,000 masks and used 30 different sewing machines to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, because he could. I mean, we were making masks, so he'd sew until the bobbin ran out, and he would grab something else and sew on it.
Well, that's a good way to use up the bobbin thread.
Yeah, it was a great way to clean out bobbins. It was a great way just to give some variety to what he was doing. I kept some machines lubricated that maybe don't get as much use as others do.
I don't think this is part of your business, even though you do have it on your website, but you have information about several of the sewing machine brands, the history of them, and what all is included in that information.
So it kind of depends on what sewing machine manufacturer we're talking about. I have a ton on it, from like what the first machine was all the way through where they were manufactured, the history of the plants. And that is simply because Singer kept immaculate records. I mean, they recorded every sewing machine they made, where it was made, all of that. Necky, and that's just kind of a passion project that Necky is. They are made in Italy. And they kept pretty good records as well, but they're all in Italian. I would have to go to that place to get a hold of their records. So we've kind of pieced that together through things that are online and stuff like that. On the Necky page, I have the Italian-made Neckys. Necky eventually moved to Asia for production, and I don't have records after that. Brother, I don't have as much because I can't go back and document all of the models throughout the years. But Baby Lock is my newest one. And because they're such a new company, I've been able to document every single sewing machine they've ever made.
Wow. So much research and so much information.
Yeah, and it's not really part of the business. I have it all on my website. It's really a passion of mine to educate people about sewing machines. But I want people to know what they've got and not to throw grandma's sewing machine away. It can probably be fixed and working.
Yeah. Who do you make your quilts for?
I don't make them for anyone in particular. Typically, when I make a quilt, it's because I have a design coming out. Or like last year, I did the shop hop for all Iowa shop hop. I made a quilt for them And that was a freebie pattern in their magazine that quilters can buy when they go to the shop. And it's using a special line of fabric just for that shop hop. So the only way to get the fabric is to go to one of the shops that's a member.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, typically I make things, well, for the business. I do Carolina Moore's Quilt Block Mania most months, and then I do my own designs.
So besides business, are you working on anything for yourself right now?
I am not working on anything for myself. Typically, this time of the year, I block out so that I can do costuming for the school musical. And I don't have to do costuming this year. So I may actually pull something and make something for myself. I bought Tula Pink's new line with cats. And I really want to do something just for myself with it.
Yeah.
I just don't know what yet.
Well, Mel, describe how you went from having quilting as a hobby and you chose to make it into a business.
So really, the business kind of came, I had been a craft blogger, didn't want to do general crafts and recipes anymore. We had already started collecting the sewing machines, and I had all of this quilting knowledge that I just wanted to put down somewhere after 3 decades of quilters in my life. And so I started the website just as a place to like share information. Never really thought anybody would buy a pattern. I had shared some photos of a work in progress. I was working out a traditional pattern in a different way. And somebody was like, release it and I'll buy it. And so I wrote the pattern. I threw it up on Etsy. And that was the end of the story. I mean, it's been going ever since.
It seems like a lot of people started with Etsy.
It's super easy to do if you're a beginner. It's pretty low risk. Like I didn't have to set up my own shop. I didn't have to have a shopping cart on my website and all of that. I didn't make as much money through them, of course, because of all the fees. But it let me know if it was going to be a sink or swim kind of deal without investing a bunch of money.
Yeah, that's a good way. Now, share the name of your business and how did you come up with the name?
Oh, this is a great story. Super creative here, Paula. My mom's business was the Quilting Room. I just tacked my name on the end. So when you were talking earlier about episode names, I was laughing going, yeah, wait till you hear how I named my business. I just took my mom's.
Well, what a neat nod to your mom with this quilting business.
That too. But yeah, I had no clue. And when you set up a blog, the first thing it wants is, what are you going to name it? And I'm like, the Quilting Room with me, with Mel. Yep, that's where we're going. I really should have said my least favorite part of quilting was the naming of the pattern process, because I'm just like, I don't know.
I feel your pain.
I have a couple that are like done and they're not released because I'm like, I don't know what to call it.
And that's why I don't come up with catchy names for each episode.
Exactly. I understood that. Totally.
So what do you offer through the Quilting Room with Mel?
So with the Quilting Room with Mel, I offer a lot of quilting tips and instruction, because really, if you don't know how to cut a piece of fabric, downloading a pattern or purchasing a pattern is going to be like Greek, because we do have our own little language. And I try to spell things out as best I can. But I have a lot of those like basics. I have a lot of free patterns so that you can practice. I want everyone to try it. So if I can give you some basics and a pattern to try with little investment on your side, that hopefully you'll come back and buy some of my patterns. And then as far as paid patterns to go, my 2 big ones, I have one called Down the Yellow Brick Road. It is all yellow and sunflowers as a based off the Kansas Star quilt block. And it came out last year on Kansas's birthday. And then my other one, and this is the one that gets all the sales really, I have a 8-point star or a Lemoyne star, however you call it, that looks like it was traditionally pieced without a Y seam because the Y seams are of the devil. I don't like them at all. So I spent a lot of time figuring out how to make a good sized block of it and never sew a Y seam or half square triangle.
Oh, yeah, those straight seams are much easier. I've only done my seams a few times, so I'm not quite there calling them of the devil.
Yeah, my mom loved a good Y seam. The tumbling block, the schoolhouse block, those were some of her favorites. So I knew as a child I did not like that at all.
So do you consider that pattern you sold when she asked you to make the pattern for her? Or how did you feel when you made a pattern and you put it out into the world and somebody chose to buy it? How did that feel?
So it was that pattern that I had shared pictures of, like some math and some drawings, just because I needed social media content. And one of my followers was like, you make that and I'll buy it. And I kind of laughed it off. And it was probably 6-8 months. And I had posted pictures of the block, kind of talked about it. And she was like, no, really, write that pattern and I'll buy it. And I wrote the pattern. I put it up, put it out in a newsletter. And I kind of went, okay, I'm going to get a sale because she will go buy it. She promised she would go buy it. And like by the end of the week, I had like 20 patterns sold. And I was like, oh, I can do this. Okay, I can do this. It was a great confidence boost.
Is that pattern still out there and do you still get sales off of it?
Yes, that no Y seam star block is still out there. I still get sales. I actually have done a full pattern quilt off of it, but it is not out yet. That quilt is still in my quilt frame.
So it's going to be out soon.
Soon.
Well, I did want to jump back because the day your episode is published is a special day for you. You want to share about that?
Oh, yeah. So before we started recording, Paula told me that May 5th would be the date that my episode hopefully will drop. And that is my Grandma Green. So that is the grandma that I lived with forever and ever. That is her birthday. And this is 2025. So it would have been her 114th birthday.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And then to even tie that back to all the old sewing machines, Paula, I have her mom's sewing machine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's probably the best birthday present I've ever gotten is when a cousin called and said, hey, I found my grandma's sewing machine in my garage. Do you want it? And I'm like, yep, I'll be up this weekend to get it.
Didn't give her any time to change her mind.
None whatsoever.
Thanks so much, Mel. I am so happy that I finally got to hear your story on A Quilter's Life.
Well, thanks, Paula, for having me. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Also, I want to hear about you and your wonderful quilts. Please contact me, Paula Chamberlain, through the website to set up an interview. And as always, thanks for listening.